everyone. Thank you, Stephen, for that introduction. Every one of you here has already made up their minds about me and my talk within the first 3 to 6 seconds of seeing me, hearing my name, before even the introduction was finished. And that's okay. That shows us that we're humans, and we all have perceptions and biases. However, what is not okay is not acknowledging that these perceptions and biases affect our work, especially if we are tech founders, coders, engineers, and so on. And the danger of not knowing that we have these biases and accepting them is very visible in the technology world today. We've seen some of the algorithmic biases that my colleague Andrea has spoken previously and heard about it a lot. And that's the reason we're all here today, because we're concerned about these challenges. Most of us don't even admit that we have biases because, frankly, we don't understand the limitations or non-limits of our biases. The extent of it is where I'm trying to get to, right? And the normalization of this is how it is, this is how I think, or the fit problem, especially in human capital management technologies like recruitment and HR tech, is quite a serious problem because we all act from a place of gut feeling. And if I'm an engineer and I'm acting from a place of my gut feeling, I'm building code that acts as my gut feeling. And we've seen that already. So I had the honor of listening to late Stephen Hawking in Lisbon, actually, not too long ago, before he passed away. And he said, and I quote, that AI will either be the worst thing or the best thing for humanity. And then he went on to explain why he felt that way. On the same day, I made up my decision or my mind in terms of what AI was. And for me, AI and tech is as good as its makers. So we all have to be consciously responsible for the AI and the algorithms and the codes that we're introducing. And you might say, but why? Well, Andrea very quickly walked through Tay, an absolutely innocent bot that was made by Microsoft, published on Twitter, and it had some fascinating things to learn and contribute when it went on. Entertainingly, yet very dirty, sexual, no-filter jokes or conversations, agreeing with Hitler on the perception of Jews. Of course, it was fun for people to do this, but the bot learned it. And it wasn't fun, especially when it said that I learned from you, and you are dumb too, to humans. Because she's right, they learn at a pace a lot faster than we humans can in our lifetime, right? So this is exactly why I believe that AI is extremely important, especially for us makers, because we all in this room have opinions about people based on our experience, especially if we are involved within technology businesses these days, which I think almost everyone is. And you may question, but HR tech is innocent. Recruitment, we don't do those sorts of things in recruitment HR tech. We're not sort of building too much AI. It's still early days. Is it really? We already have colleagues in the industry testing face-to-face interviews with a bot. So we're not early. We're actually late when we're talking about our human consciousness, our biases and perceptions as human beings, because we're already training and implementing technology that is not ethically designed in many cases. We have seen a lot of examples that my colleague previously showed, and I will talk through a couple more specifically to do with recruitment. But let's face it, hiring is not a one single decision. Hiring decisions are a combination of tons and tons of predictive analytics, systems, and decision makers. So when we add all different sorts of technology that is available today, this is a serious problem, especially the speed at which this technology is being introduced, from candidate job posting to suggestions to candidate engagement tools and all sorts, right? And so because of the speed of these tools, I wanted to bring your attention to a couple examples. One of them was Amazon's. Recently, we've all heard about it, how it was biased against women. And the reason it was doing that, Andrea's explained, But what I'm really concerned about is that it had to start somewhere. The code, a line of code or something had to start somewhere before the deep machine learning took it on its own and started to build it into something it wasn't meant to be. So there is an element of human input. Even deep machine learning does not mean that bots will start creating their own code without any sort of human input. So let's be very clear. We humans are very, very responsible for this. One of the studies conducted in the UK also suggested that majority of our HR systems and bots are actually against minorities, ethnic groups, and people of same sex. So there must be someone sitting there thinking one day, actually for this job, a man is better than a woman, and straight is my preference over gay. So it started somewhere, and that's where I'm concerned. Meredith Whittaker mentions a very, very important thing and asks a question when she closes her talk. And she asks, who was sitting around the table when some of these algorithms were encoded? Who was responsible? What was the diversity looking like around the table? And what sort of questions were being asked? And that is why we have to ask ourselves these questions, starting now, if we're already not doing it. Arguably, there are huge benefits as well of having AI and automation. It helps us streamline processes, bring in efficiencies, and of course eliminate some early biases that may arise due to my race, the way I look, because I may be fat, or because I may be pretty. So AI definitely helps with some of these discriminations and biases, if trained over time and ethically. Let's not forget that these machines need constant input. The data that we're inputting in them is what helps them train ethically, if we do the right job, as coders, as engineers, as data scientists, and as humans responsible for the tech. Studies done by big companies prove that we all see the world differently. We all have different backgrounds, cultures, upbringing, countries we're born in, countries we're raised in. I do. And so we see things from a very different perspective. My perception about each one of you will be very different, just like yours will be for me. So usually when I'm in a room, I would ask them a question to look at this image and tell me which center circle they feel is larger. And majority of them will pick one over the other, when the reality is that they're both the same size. But our perception and the way our brain operates is quite unique. And that's good. What can we do about this? Let's not be like this guy, firstly, who knows everything about everything. It gets quite boring, right? In my opinion, there are 3 key things we can do about this. Firstly, create a process if you don't have a process. Whether you're a big business or a small startup, create a process. Have some checklists, bring in some guidelines. Look up Tech UK, IEEE. They have tons of open source information on the sort of things you should do to make sure that you're building the right kind of features, functionalities, adding the right kind of code, and you're making sure that this is not something that's going to result in a huge bias or a problem later on. So have these checklists. If you're interested more about some of these things because you don't have the process in place, get in touch with me. I'm happy to help and point you in the right direction. The second thing I think is very important is to use the ongoing learning process, is to continue to test the theory of the checklist and of your ethical guidelines to see if it works in practice and keep training. Have patience with your machines before you launch it into the market, because that's when you get into real trouble. And thirdly, measure your outputs and your goals with your teams, with the people around the table, the engineers, the data scientists, the logic builders, because that really helps them understand where their perception and biases may be influencing the code and the technology eventually. Now, startups and small businesses in the room might go, but we don't have enough cash to do all of this all the time. And big businesses might say, we don't have the agility to do it. However, I'll give you a few stats which will make sure that you would want to do it. ADP conducted some research, and they confirmed that companies that do recruitment without bias have 45% more likely growth in the market share, have 42% more applications that stay, and 33% more profitability. So as a startup and a small business, this is a no-brainer for you and for the worth of your IP. And as a big business, this really does matter when it comes to your consumer trust and loyalty. Now, finally, let's all be open-minded. We all see our lives through our own lens and perceptions. No matter how much we try to look at it from someone else's point of view, we still do not have the whole picture. There are numerous studies done that actually prove that my perception is very different to every single one of you in this room under given circumstances. So let's be open-minded. Let's be critical about ourselves and our teams. Be positive in assessing some of these things. There are numerous tests and help available if you want to just get around the table to understand your and your team's biases and perceptions in the first place. And make it friendly, make it open and honest. Hire more diverse people. Have internships for STEM, for girls and women. Hire gay and transgender people in the same tech product-driven sort of whatever action you want to call it. Get it more included in front of your wider workforce and population to see what they think about a particular feature, functionality, and how it's working. Not only because this is going to help you with continuous improvement and learning, but because this is the right thing to do. In my last closing couple sentences, I want to say this, that I want to continue to talk about tech and AI and bias from a human conscious perspective. And it is the only subject that when I talk about gives me migraines, not because it is difficult, but because it is extremely important. And as soon as we start delving into human psychology, it gets very, very complex. Human psychology is more complex than any technology we have seen today, to date. And fortunately or unfortunately, most of us really, really like ourselves. We do, a lot. We think that the way we operate and the way we make decisions is usually right, especially if we're a thought leader or proven in our business expertise. And that is a dangerous pitfall that I think we should all avoid. Thank you for your time.